Hello to everybody and welcome back to our continuing series of interviews with past presidents of the Ottoman and Turkish Studies Association. Today, Baki Tezcan and I are speaking with Dan Goffman and Carolyn Goffman. Dan Goffman is today retired from the Department of History at DePaul University in Chicago. When I first met him, he was a professor at Ball State University, and I was a graduate student. And I have extremely fond memories of how kind he was to a struggling newbie in the Ottoman archives. So it's a pleasure to be interviewing him today about his time as president of the Ottoman and Turkish Studies Association from 1994 to 1996. And we'll see wherever the discussion takes us about his career as an Ottoman historian. So we usually start with a beginning point. And in the biography that you've shared with us, I think that the beginning point might usefully be the question, when and why did you decide to shift your graduate study focus from Jewish studies to Ottoman history at the University of Chicago?
It's complicated. I decided to Earlham College. I have no record of the no Middle Eastern college. Earlham College has no Middle Eastern theme. And I decided to go to graduate school at the University of Chicago and major in Jewish history. And I met Arkadius Kahan there, and he was extremely nice. He was a Holocaust survivor. And he suggested that I read Shabbat Tzvi's Gershom Sholem. It's a thick book, a tome. And I read it and I realized that the only language that he did not know was Turkish. And I realized that Shabbat Tzvi has grown up in Izmir. So I approached Arkadius Kahan and asked him about the study of the Ottoman history in Chicago. And he mentioned Hillel Anata to me. It's a serendipity moment. And I decided to take Hillel Anata's courses, and I fell in love with it. And I think Hillel Anata's was maybe a document fetishist. And Hillel Anata swore that I would find Shabbat Tzvi's documents. However, I did not find Shabbat Tzvi's documents at all. At all. And I studied for maybe 2 years in Turkish, and I took Bob Donkov Ottoman history course, Turkish course, and then I transferred to Hillel Anata's paleography course. I was baffled because, for example, Hillel Anata's brought me documents I could not read at all. and he said, okay, I shall copy it down for you. And I could not read it at all because the training of Halil Anatras is in florid scripture. Do you know the 20th century script? I cannot read it. And I sit in Regenstein Library getting helpless. I tried to read it and I failed, miserable. I think that it's a fascinating project by my getting into Ottoman history. I went to, incidentally, I was extremely shy. And when I walked into the class, I did not speak at all. I cannot explain, extremely shy.
But so we've talked about this irony with Dan having aphasia now after his stroke, because when he was at the University of Chicago, he was too shy to speak in class.
Yeah.
But now
Too shy.
and now he can't speak.
Yeah.
But that changed. I mean, obviously you had to
Slowly,
in-
it's changed
speak.
because
No, in paleography classes
Yeah,
you had to speak,
yeah.
right? I mean, you had to
I
translate.
had to translate.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
gradually you taught.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. True
And-
baptism by fire.
Okay.
Skip it.
Well, it's
This is having aphasia. Sometimes things come out unfiltered.
that's fine. I think that you may have seen some of our earlier interviews, which also have their unfiltered segments. It's I think it's partly this setting. We make people so comfortable that they say what's on their minds. I had a similar baptism with Halil Inalcik, who came for a week to Princeton when I was a graduate student. And I had taken about 6 months of Turkish at that point, and I had had Arabic before. And someone said, well, you're going to do Ottoman, so you might as well sit there in the paleography. And I said, I'm not going to understand anything. And they said, never mind, just come along. And I looked at this piece. It was one of these petitions, which then has like 8 or 10 different, entries on it. And you were supposed to figure out what was first and what came after. And I couldn't even read the words. I'm sure that they said things like olur, right?
Yeah.
Because that's always what it says when you really can't read it. And Inalcik just forged ahead. And I think it was his enthusiasm for documents, which I think is, sort of part and parcel of the fetish package. There's just this huge enthusiasm and energy for teaching about them.
Definitely.
So,
And Dan said recently that Inalcik believed Dan would always find the documents. They were there. And that wasn't always the case, but Inalcik believed they were there.
Yeah.
so I can't remember, did you end up writing about Shabtai Tzvi?
No, I decided to switch the topics. The rise of Izmir as a commercial power. And
Right.
I then wrote about Sabata space in a chapter.
Okay.
Yeah.
So while you were a graduate student at the University of Chicago, and having moved into the Ottoman ambit, when did the Turkish Studies Association become something that you knew about? Do you remember, how you first learned about it?
I do remember that. It wasn't until my book was published and I got an award for the Kupperlu Prize from the award from the TSA, and I realized that the TSAs was prominent. I realized that I would receive our membership from the TSAs, and I volunteered to screen the book club. And then my second year, I chaired the book club.
Book reviews.
But
The bulletin.
no,
Oh,
not the
the book
prize.
The book prize. Right.
And
Right.
it's not until don't remember I was green, so green.
True.
I bumped into, I think, I don't remember that. I think that the Kupperlu Prize was when I felt the TSA was important.
Okay.
Back then, there was no Zoom meetings happening every month where
No.
his name is circulated among all kinds of people. So I think right now graduate students will hear about us earlier, but so the only possibility you would hear about TSA back then could be at Mesa meetings, I imagine.
Yes, Mesa meeting, and I think I do remember I presented at the Mesa meeting in Chicago.
And you met with the TSA group?
No, I don't. I don't remember that. Panel was Tony Greenwood, I think Sarari Faruqi, and I don't remember, and me.
Right. And it was hard to find TSA at Mesa. I mean, if you didn't know to look for it, you wouldn't necessarily have found out. And I mean, I don't know if other people at Chicago, other students were active, but I don't remember Inalcik ever being active in TSA.
No,
it was not his thing. I mean, he was busy reading documents.
Yeah,
not his thing. However, strange. I watched the webcast, and Alan Fisher, Michigan State, William Gresswood, Colorado State, Jones, I don't remember Soleil, that pronunciation, Colorado University. And I was at Ball State University. No one was at Chicago Ivy League School, Princeton, nothing. It's so strange.
True.
I think my way of thinking about it is I think at institutions where there is a concentration of Ottomanists, like one person, a language teaching, funding for graduate students, like there is a hub, probably people don't feel the need to reach out and be part of something larger because they have their own little world actually functioning.
I think you are right. Right. It's interesting. However,
please.
Jamal Kapat was establishment of the TSA.
Yes.
He was at Wisconsin University.
That's right, medicine. Yes. Yeah. That's another one. Our next question is about your cohort in graduate school. Were there others with you? I mean, this is University of Chicago and Halil Nalcik there, so I imagine there would be a few students who studied Ottoman and Turkish studies. And if so, did they enter the fields? Did they become, you know, historians or modern Turkey specialists? And do you remember anyone who took alternative career paths? Maybe, I don't know, State Department or business, those kinds of things. That do you have any recollection?
I racked my brain. I
We came up with. a list
doesn't
here.
remember anything.
We came up with this. list.
Rhodes Murphy is Bruce Masters, Tony Greenwood, Tamara Brahmat, Linda Dahlen is a Ottomanist. I don't remember anyone who chose a career path.
And part of this question is also whether TSA, do you remember TSA having a role in transition? But you already kind of answered that TSA was not very visible at this particular stage in your academic career in graduate school. So there was no, I mean, this is something we should perhaps think about ourselves, like what could we do to help graduate students transition to professional life? I think in big universities, you know, they do like professionalization kind of courses, but in some places they might not have that opportunity. So it is one of the things that perhaps we could think about doing once a year, like a little meeting for how to pitch your Ottoman history or modern Turkey experience to a different kind of job description, or those kinds of things might be helpful, I guess, because there's never any Ottoman history position anywhere. They're all, I imagine you also got a Middle Eastern history position, right?
Yeah, no, I got a non-Western history position
At Ball State, right?
at
it
Ball
was, yeah,
State.
Everything.
Everything.
Yeah. Yeah. So about the professional development idea, I wonder if at the Ottoman workshops, you know, the Great Lakes Ottoman workshop, the West Coast Ottoman workshop, you know, the ones that I think we mentioned those in Dan's bio. I wonder if they ever do any professional development, because they always attract a lot of grad students. I think at least they used to.
I think that I struggled with the professional development at the TSA Bulletin. For instance, I invited the Turkish literature panel to submit papers. I contacted Holbrook, Victoria Holbrook, to submit papers. And unfortunately, the editors dropped it. And for instance, I dreamed up the article, the Turkish article who is prominent, and I translated into English and published it. And I think Orhanlu Transportation, I translated it into English and published it. Unfortunately, it was dropped.
Yeah, was-
No, the editors
Oh, publishing those type of articles didn't continue.
didn't continue.
Okay. So the bulletin was meant for book reviews, but you tried to add more kinds of articles
Yeah.
into it, but the organization didn't want to continue it.
Yeah, editors. I kind of explained it. The editors were dropped it.
Mhm.
Do you understand it?
Do you still have that translation? Did you ever? Do you still have it?
I published it
It would
and
be-
as a bulletin.
Oh,
Yeah.
bulletin. Okay, got it.
Oh, so-
Got it.
It
So
would be
the
like-
idea was not continued?
The
after you
idea
left.
was not continue.
Right, so you did it when you were editor,
Yeah,
but then it never actually got any, didn't stay because
Didn't
people had
stay.
other ideas.
and I was worried about Turkish literature. The article were scant in Turkish literature, and so I got the idea of soliciting MESA panel of MESA.
So you would contact people who'd given a paper
Yeah.
at Mesa and ask them to submit
Yeah.
to the bulletin.
Right.
That's I think a literature article today would find its place, but I really like what you did. The translation is something I think we could really think about. I don't know, part of the problem is the cost, printing things. And when you go, for instance, right now with our journal, if we go over a certain number of pages, we have to pay extra.
Yeah,
But
I do remember that.
now there's so much online, so one could imagine maybe it doesn't have to be printed, but things could be circulated in a PDF or in a sort of online publication format. And I can see how translation could be really useful, because there are some very good Turkish studies, or there are some very good primary sources that do not receive enough attention because not everybody reads English. So this is a very good idea.
However, the only stopgap is money, paying the translator. I decided to translate it myself.
Well, this is, I mean, this is what Gary Leiser did with Köprülü's work. I mean, and that I think was a labor of love. He decided that that was more important than any other publishing agenda that he had. And so just dedicated himself to publishing several of Köprülü's sort of key works so that they would be available in English, I guess, to people starting out in the field or people in comparative, you know, in comparative topics. And that's a real gift. I suppose we could think about even what it would take to sponsor like an online publication that would be a collection of classic Ottoman history articles, you know, to sort of do a series like that. You should talk to Kent Schull about the Edinburgh series. Maybe Edinburgh would sponsor something about that.
Maybe the graduate students could be solicited to do the translations of it.
They have a
Paid,
lot.
only paid.
Only paid,
Yeah, they have to be paid.
Their time is way too short given the demands on them these days. They have huge teaching demands, limited funding, big loans.
Fine.
But the idea of translation, I think that's key. I think that really is. And it also speaks to ways to create bridges across different national groups of scholars.
Yeah, definitely.
So not just scholars in Turkey, even, you know, younger scholars or established scholars in Turkey, but in other countries where English isn't necessarily the lingua franca, because there's important scholarship in Hungarian and Romanian and Georgian probably.
Greece.
And that kind of a project could be good, especially if you don't have to print it, because that then reduces the cost just to the translation and organization. Interesting idea. Thank you. That's actually very inspirational.
It works.
Yeah. So here's the key question. Having edited the bulletin, right? And it sounds like watched in frustration as someone else took it over and decided that your initiative wasn't worth continuing. How were you inspired to become president of the Turkish Studies Association? It sounds like that the misstep of inspiring the next editors didn't deter you from continuing to serve?
I think that maybe Donna Carter asked me to serve as president. Donna Carter was a lovely man. And I wish that I could respond to him more forcefully. For instance, 1986, Donna Carter went to Istanbul and played with my son. He did Tales, Lone Ranger's Tales, He-Man, play with him and He-Man. He-Man.
Masters of the Universe.
Masters
Yeah,
of
right.
the Universe.
It's true. He was, yeah. I mean, he also helped, he helped the Ottoman historians too, not just Sam.
Of course.
Right. He was the other more senior person in the archives when I started out. And the two of you really taught me something about the kind of the importance of the collegiality of the archives.
Yeah.
And of really helping people step into, you know, the challenges of things and not to be discouraged. And I think that was really important for me.
Really important.
And I worry that those long weeks, day after day in the archives, which I don't think are a shared experience. The experience of long weeks trying to read Ottoman documents is a shared experience, but it's very disparate because people are in different places. So while it's much cheaper now for people to come and to get materials, and it's much easier to get scans and all of those things, I think we've lost that sort of ongoing seminar in Ottoman paleography, the socialization into a professional life that we were so fortunate to have in those days.
Yeah, I agree. I do remember the chores of copying down the documents, and I was thinking about it as I was copying it down, right? And I think if the photocopy is gone, I cannot explain it.
You mean if you could have photocopied, you would have been able to process it.
Yeah, process it in the same way.
Yes. Michel Legal had a very wonderful way of summing that up. He said, when you photocopy things, you transfer your ignorance from one place to another.
Yeah.
Yes.
Definitely, yeah.
I love that.
I
mean, we thought that photocopies, you know, were going to solve everything.
Yeah.
But but
No,
they didn't.
But the digital is.
And of course, a lot of people think Google Translate will solve everything.
Yeah.
It'll be a while before Ottoman Turkish is
I know.
on its list. But Dan, so so Donald Quatter just asked you to be president and that was it? You were president?
I don't remember the sequence of events.
Mm-hmm.
I unfortunately, I don't remember 30 years ago. I was worried that my reconstruction is faulty.
Everyone's is faulty. I wouldn't worry too much. You had a very clear memory of being in the archives. So, but so I mean, the sort of election process is not that important. I think what's more interesting is what kinds of impressions did being president leave with you? Were there particular challenges, particular successes?
Maybe it was frustrating for me because don't forget that the TSA was only maybe 200 members,
Or, you don't really know.
maybe two
Random number.
random number.
That's not so random. It's okay.
Yeah, and the struggle with the assignment of prizes, secretaries, etc., and I am struggling with the assignment of frustrating, and I don't remember that. I do remember I thought I did, and I requested the editor to speak with the graduate students. And they explained that the book was important. I cannot explain it.
You mean like at Mesa? You had a
They
session?
may say a panel
You had a panel to help graduate students develop their writing.
develop the writing. And I invited the editors that I knew to speak. They're developing their writing.
How did that go?
It's fine. I think maybe 20 people were participating in it.
Yeah, and that's an idea that has persisted, not every year, but there are kind of periodically meetings with book editors at Mesa who participate in a panel for graduate students about the whole process of transforming your thesis into a book and seeking a publisher, talking with editors. Because I think it's still, one of the major transition points and one of the major challenges.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I do remember that the TS Bulletin, I invited the editor of the TSA Bulletin to type with the graduate students about the articles.
But
How to submit articles.
Oh, okay. Right. Even after they rejected your idea, you still invited them to speak. That was very generous.
That is a great idea. I think, Carolyn, you mentioned we could do such things also in regional workshop meetings. I think that's a great idea. This year we have not been able to find a campus to host Western Ottomanists workshop yet. We have one for next year. And so I was thinking of doing something just purely online, because that is easy. You can host people online. It's for free, basically. So that I'm gonna think about what you just said. Maybe have a session, because these meetings are specifically directed to graduate students. It would actually be useful to have a session where somebody comes and talks to them about, how to turn their presentation into a submission to a journal. That would be really, really good. Sort of make it a part of these workshops, regional workshops. That's a great idea. Thank you. Thank you so much. I love that idea. And I'm going to implement it this year in this WOW business will do. That's a great idea.
I think that you should invite the editors.
Yes.
If you have, if you are comfortable with the editors, you should invite the editors, right?
I think we could do that with our own journal's editor, inviting, you want to talk to this group of people to tell them what you look for in the submissions, that actually is a perfect idea. Thank you so much. Our next question is about memories of people from OTSA before you, especially people whom we can no longer interview because they are not with us any longer. And actually, while Halil Inalcik has not been an OTSA president, we would love to hear any anecdotes if you have any.
Oh my God, I am afraid to discuss the anecdote. Because Halil Inalcik was an old school historian.
You feel like he's still watching you, don't you?
Yeah. I think, do you want me to pass on the stories about Halil Inalcik or not?
Absolutely.
Like, that would work. You mentioned Donald Quattert.
Donald Quattert.
Any other people you can remember?
Yes, I mentioned Halil Inalcik before Donald Quattert. One, Halil Inalcik asked me to be his research assistant. And I was very scared because I have witnessed the past research assistant. For instance, he ordered me to do the grocery shopping.
Not you, his assistant.
His assistant to do the grocery shopping, to drive him around, to pick up books at the library. I was worried about it, and I asked Donna, who was a good friend of mine, and of Inalcik, what should I do about it? And Donna said, I shall call him and tell him that you are.
Donald Locke said he would call Inalcik and say that he needed Dan as a research
He
assistant.
needed Dan as a research assistant, and Halil Inalcik said that.
Because Inalcik respected Donald Locke very much.
Yeah.
So when Locke said he needed Dan, he saved Dan, and it was okay. There were no hard feelings.
Yeah.
So that was a lucky escape.
Two, I went to Atlanta to write my dissertation, and Donald Quattert asked me if he could read the dissertation. And I said, okay. And I sent him the dissertation, the chapter of the dissertation, and I was talking to Halil Bey, and I mentioned that I sent him the dissertation, and he exploded. He exploded, and the weather in it is a storm outside.
We were in the middle
Thunder.
of a terrible thunderstorm. Dan was on the phone, and Inalcik was yelling at him, and Inalcik hung up. Dan went completely white, and he said to me, "My career is over." So we waited a few minutes, and then Dan called back, and he talked to
Shafki
Yohanna,
Yohanna, his wife.
right, who's so nice.
She is so nice. Unfortunately, he is deceased now. Halil Inalcik calmed down, and he civilized talk to me. Two, three. I requested that he do the recommendation for me, and he requested that I should write it myself.
He always did that.
Always does that. The little Alnatress was ignorant of the culture.
The academic culture.
Yeah.
But he's not the only one. I mean, when we get recommendations from older English scholars, they're 4 sentences long.
Of course, 2
And-
sentences long.
Anachik did that for Dan. There was a 2-sentence letter. And finally, someone told him, this is a worthless letter.
Right, but they assume that, you know, it's on Oxford letterhead, it's on my signature. Who isn't going to listen to me? I actually, so Dan, I was going to ask you, I mean, you were actually a student of Inalchik's. I wasn't. You know, I studied with him that week that he came to Princeton. And yet at one point I spoke at Bilkent. I gave a lecture there, and he introduced me as one of his students.
Wow.
So I'm not going to contradict him.
Wow.
But it was this very interesting dynamic of, because when we were students, I don't know if you felt it, but in Princeton, we very much felt that there was the Chicago contingent and there was the Princeton contingent. And there was something of a divide, you know, I don't know where it came from, but there was definitely a sense of you were either an Inalchik student or you were everything else or something else.
Everything else.
So who else was at Chicago when you were a student? Was Richard Chambers there?
Yes,
When you were a student?
Yeah, Richard Chambers was there. In fact, he taught me Turkish language, and Tony Greenwood taught me Turkish language too.
Okay.
Yeah.
And John Woods was also there at the
Yes.
time. Was he
Yeah.
not?
John, when I never took courses from John Woods,
But he was there.
but he
present.
was there.
Right.
Yeah, in Turkey, this culture, I think, persisted for a long time, and I don't know whether or not it's still persisting. But if I remember correctly, I did take a seminar with him after he retired from Chicago. He came to Bilkent, where I was an undergraduate in international relations. But in my last year, they sort of launched their history program under his leadership. And there was a class of students who were doing preparatory work for the MA. So I took some, and I do remember a sort of an assistant carrying his bag, if I remember that. that kind of stuff. But that is, I think that is how I think they grew up, sort of, because I heard stories about Barkan and how the many sort of edited works of his editions of documents were actually produced by graduate students in seminars who would just read the deftars and then transcribe them, and then that would turn into a volume of documents edited and things of that type. Apparently that's what I heard. So I think this kind of stuff was very common at the time.
I knew that. Halil and Natchez is very dear to me. It's hilarious.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, it is hilarious today when you're sharing a story like this. I mean, it tells us how much things changed over decades in our field. Because today, in any university, if you have a research assistant the kind of things that you would consider asking that person to do are so completely different. And these kinds of things are totally out of possibility. Asking them to do shopping. That is good. It is good that we are able to laugh at that, because it wouldn't be good if we were not laughing at it. So thank you so much.
That's interesting. I mean, this is also, it was the culture in Israel when I was a student, when I was an undergraduate there for a year. And it was definitely influenced by the German academic culture where, you know, there was the professor and there was his seminar, and there was someone who had finished, you know, the first PhD and was working on the second PhD, who carried his briefcase and everything. But I do have this one memory of Inalcik. It's very visual. When he came into this class that he taught at Princeton, and he was carrying, like, he had an armful of books and there were papers spilling in all directions. And it was this wonderful image of kind of the, you know, it was sort of the picture of the absent-minded professor, which is very funny because Inalcik was anything but absent-minded. He was completely focused. Maybe he was absent-minded about what was going on around him, but he was completely focused on what he was doing. So, but I think these stories are really important because, for one thing, he left a 500-page, you know, book of interviews with him, which has his version of, you know, his decades in the field. And it's very interesting to read because it from his perspective, he was very single-minded and focused on this mission, essentially to create Ottoman studies in Turkey. That is to sort of, you know, haul the study of the Ottomans into the 20th century and into the second half of the 20th century by, you know, bringing in the study of other history, by, you know, systematizing the study of the critical study of documents, and that his own narration is very, very focused and driven.
I think that he succeeded in this country. Definitely.
You mean he managed to sort of accomplish his goals here?
Managed to accomplish his goals here, but not in Turkey.
But maybe when he went back to Turkey, he did.
Yeah. I don't know, Baki, what do you think? I think at least partially in Turkey.
I would say in Turkey, there already was a strong tradition of socioeconomic history. If you look at the work of Barkan, I think of a lot of the things that Halil Bey did benefited from Barkan's work. And I would also say, while Köprülü did not do socioeconomic history, Köprülü, as a sort of example, scholarly example, was very much in touch with what is written in Europe about the Ottoman Empire. He really followed, I think, the publications in Europe. So I think Köprülü and Barkan were pretty amazing people on whom Inalcik further built. But you're right in the sense that maybe in the next generation we do not see such great names in Turkey. Yet I part of it, I think, is related to the fact that socioeconomic history at large has sort of taken a back seat in recent decades throughout the world. And I am not hopeless though, because I do know that there are some young people right now who are going back to socioeconomic history. And I think we will soon see some good work in socioeconomic history coming both here and there. There has been sort of a cultural turn overall, not just in Turkey, or it's throughout the world. Like we are writing more about sort of works, manuscripts, rather than going to the archive and doing a lot of legwork to come up with numbers and sort of, you know, interpreting them. That kind of work took a break, I think, but I hope, and I can see some examples of it right now, it's coming back. Like Hülya Canbakal has been working on some very large database of estate records, and she's close to come up with sort of general interpretive things. And I know of a few names in Turkey who are working on, again, socioeconomic history, asking the question about what happened to çiftliks, etc. So
Yep.
I think it's going to come back.
Yeah. I think also there's generationally the İnalcık's presence in Turkey, you know, founding the history department at Bilkent, had a certain weight. He was, in a sense, the narrator of Ottoman historiography for more than one generation. And so, and he did leave this book of interviews. And so a critical, you know, kind of view, like you just gave, of İnalcık in the context of Köprülü and Barkan and the others, is probably necessary to, you know, to acknowledge the contributions of each in sort of building Ottoman history. So, but it's a fascinating project in and of itself.
I wonder, did Barkan, was he obsessed with the documents or not?
You know, I never met, I don't know Barkan. I only know of him through stories and through his publications. He seems to be very document focused because he has edited volumes of documents that relate to Tapu Tahrir Defters, to muhasebes of waqfs, etc. But I think his most important works are the ones in which he is interpreting the overall results, like related to, for instance, demographic change, change in population, change in production, change in monetary value, and things of that sort. And so he was both, I would say, very much focused on documents, but he was also very much inspired by the Anal school, and
Yeah,
wanted to his work in conversation with what Anal school, what Brodel was talking about. So he, in a similar way, I think İnalcık is very similar. İnalcık too, even though he was, you're right in calling him maybe a document fetishist, but when he wrote his sort of synthesis of socioeconomic history, he was in conversation with other socioeconomic historians trying to situate the Ottomans. And one thing I noticed is he has a different tone in English than in Turkish. In English, he is more part of a global conversation on historiography. In Turkish, he adopts a slightly different tone. You can, I mean, it's
interesting. Yeah.
If you read his works in those contexts,
Yeah.
it changes a bit. I notice. I don't know, but it is an amazing work. That socioeconomic history book, that he did with Donald Cottard, which he did.
Ironic.
Well, that is probably he was working on it while he was your professor, I imagine. I mean, because that kind of work took forever to finish. Yeah.
Also, I think, I mean, one of the other people on that project was Soraya Faroki. And I think that we might consider interviewing Soraya because she has a memory of these people. I mean, she knew Barkan.
Of course.
And she also has a very different perspective on the whole profession because she knew all the Germans, she knew all the Turks, and she's at least a generation older than we are. And I think that her memory of what Ottoman history was about when she was a young scholar, and her perspective on how the field has changed, I think that would be extraordinarily valuable.
Yeah, I wish she would write her memoir. I mean, I would love to read her memoir.
I think all you have to do is say that to her.
Okay.
Because she's a writer. I mean,
Tinsley,
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah.
Now, looking at our questions, Amy, I think it's your turn to ask next, but I believe Dan already answered more or less everything in that one, right? When he became a president, etc. What do you think?
yeah. Oh, I think we've covered an awful lot of this, one way or another. I guess one of the questions that we could ask you is, if you think about the TSA in the context of MESA, so Ottoman studies has usually been categorized as, part of the world of Middle Eastern studies. And TSA and OTSA, certainly kind of exist within the framework of MESA for the purpose of the meetings. But do you have any thoughts about that relationship and how that works or doesn't work? Or
I think that MESA is very good for the TSA. MESA is accommodated. For instance, MESA is trying to give the TSA our forum.
Mhm.
And I do remember the TSA was sponsoring the panels of MESA. I don't.
So MESA's been good for TSA.
I think so. I wonder if you should ask this to Virginia Axon, who was president of MESA.
and of TSA, right?
Yeah, and of TSA.
Yeah. She's on our list.
We still do sponsor some of the panels, but there are so many more panels
Of course.
on Ottoman and Turkish studies today than probably there were back when you were a graduate student or junior scholar, that our sponsorship is only a little, drop in the ocean. So what we do now is we try to bring all the Ottoman and Turkish studies panels together in one PDF document to share with people so that they can see how many there are. And usually there are 2 or 3 at each time block. So you always have to choose, even if you want to attend every single time block, even if you are a really avid MESA goer and want to go to each and every time block panel, you'll definitely miss half or 2/3 of panels about Ottoman Turkish studies because there's so many of them. And similarly, you said you were frustrated about finding people to serve in prize committees, etc. Now there are so many more people around that it is easy.
I wonder why there are so many more people around. How?
University positions in Middle East, I think, multiplied. I'm a result of that personally. You see me here because there were new openings in university positions about the Middle East, and a lot of the Ottoman Turkish scholars, historians of Ottoman history, or people who work on modern Turkey in sociology, in political science, got some of those positions. So there are so many more people today, I think, which is a good thing. But I should also add, I think we are reaching the point of saturation because the new jobs are not coming up. So when I entered the job market, there were several new jobs opening in Middle East every year. And then since 2008, there has been kind of a continuous decline, and right now it's really not looking very good at this moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do remember the president of the TSA. I think the job of the president of TSA is to protect TSA from the Turkish pressure, right?
Political pressure.
Political pressure. I was glad that you objected to Joe's comment about Turkish. Can I explain it? So glad that you objected to Joe's comment about Turkish associations.
I think Dan is referring to Joe, the second president of TSA, the first person in the interview series whom we interviewed. He was suggesting that we could perhaps get in touch with Turkish American associations for fundraising purposes. And while I love the idea of fundraising, Turkish American associations as in immigrant people's association sometimes look at things differently than others do, and so that would create pressures on us. And I personally would rather be poor but not feel any political pressures. These days, in international relations, diplomacy issues, Turkey has certain priorities that we might not necessarily agree with. And so that's, I think, what you're referring to. Am I right?
Yeah, you are right.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go on, Caroline.
I was just gonna say, does it still exist, the Turkish American Association? They're still out there?
Yeah.
I think so. I think so. But what I was going to observe about the conversation we were having about expanding numbers, for me, one of the interesting things when I look at the field is not just that there are more people in the field, but the definition of what is Ottoman and who can be part of Ottoman studies has expanded enormously. So there were various minority groups within the Ottoman Empire, people who wouldn't have felt comfortable joining the project of Ottoman studies, wouldn't have found their voice there, wouldn't have found space for their voice. But I think that now that Ottoman studies just comfortably includes Armenian studies, Kurdish studies, the study of various sectarian groups, there's just more that can be Ottoman. Whereas in the past, either we didn't talk about those things, or if you were interested in Southeastern European history and the Ottoman periods, you were still within the framework of a national or nationalist historiography. And I think that while that can still be true, there's much more space in Ottoman studies now for all those people to say, yeah, I'm part of Ottoman studies, and I'm, but my Ottoman world is this world spatially, or linguistically, or historiographically. And I think it's also true chronologically. I mean, now we have people who do Ottoman studies who are talking about the contemporary world, but they see their framework as the Ottoman Empire in the contemporary world, or the Ottoman Empire in the Byzantine world, for that matter. So it's just bigger. Now, you could call that a form of imperialism, I suppose, but it doesn't feel aggressive. It feels more participatory, and I think that that's a terrific thing. So that's one of the reasons that we have so many younger people who are involved, and it's no longer sort of like, okay, can we get somebody to do this or not?
I was I was excited about you commented on in Armenian and Kurdish groups, because the TSA is impervious to political pressure, right?
You try.
We are, yeah, it's struggling, yeah.
I know what you mean. I think I was looking into old journal issues, and I was sort of to come up with a history of our prizes. And in one of them, I read that in one TSA meeting, one of the leaders of the association was saying, oh, there's going to be a Armenian genocide proposal coming up in the Senate. We should, get together and make sure we oppose it. And I thought, that might be a little out of place for a scholarly association. But at the time, I guess it was considered part of maybe what at least some members of the TSA thought was TSA is about. Because I mean, this person who was saying this was saying it very, very like matter of factly, and very, and then it appeared in the minutes. So
I do remember that.
Normal.
Thank God that ITS abolished it. ITS is Turkish funding organization.
Yes, ITS. It's right.
I do remember the struggles that I had with ITS over funding.
Questions or what?
No, I am worried about struggling, having to do with Armenian questions.
Right. Yeah. No, you're right. ITS decided. No, what happened at the end is that first the Turkish government decided to withdraw its financial support from ITS because ITS was moving more in an independent direction. And after that, what happened is ITS sort of floated for a few years with private funding, but recently they closed their doors. So on the one hand, I'm 100% in agreement with you. Political pressures have to be avoided, but it is also a fact that when it existed, ITS was providing additional support for language instruction, for subsidy for journal publications and things of that sort, and now we don't have it. So it is, I guess what we need to do is we need to come up with non-governmental ways of finding money. It's not easy. The ARIT, American Research Institute in Turkey, is much more focused on that goal, and they are doing an amazing job. I think we all owe them right now a lot because they're the only organization left that is supporting research in Ottoman and Turkish studies. I'm not quite sure how we can come up with larger sources of funding, but maybe later this year and next year, we at OTSA meetings, we could do a little bit more thinking about this because it is an important sort. ITS was, even though it was controversial in certain aspects, was a very significant presence in supporting financial.
I don't mean to imply that ITS is, the ITS funding is splendid, but I don't mean to imply that I am worried about ITS because of the political pressure, right?
Yes, yes, I'm 100% with you. I'm 100% with you. Definitely, definitely. There were moments, I think there were moments, critical moments. For instance, Donald Woodward resigned from his president
course.
of ITS at some point. That was one of those moments. So definitely, definitely, you're absolutely right.
Well, this is one of our questions to people, Dan. We are, trying to think actively and creatively about ways that we could be more effective fundraisers for OTSA. And so we will pick your brain as well and just ask you if you have any thoughts on this.
I do. Unfortunately, I did not have any thoughts on this because Joe has a myriad of thoughts on this, and I reject it. Right?
You disagree with
I disagreed with him. I just don't know.
I mean,
Sorry.
it is the case that we probably should be braver about fundraising from our own membership. And we should probably be more active at recruiting new members. It's not things that we're actually necessarily trained to do. It's not part of what we learn to do as historians or scholars of literature or political scientists. And we're used to having all of that happen in a different part of our universities. And if they need us, they kind of, come and take us by the shoulders and push us in the right direction and say, here, talk to this person. But we don't actually, see how all of the mechanism of it works. Not that it always works terribly well, but it's not something that we've learned how to do. And at the same time, during our lifetime, it's been very highly professionalized. So if it was a more amateur game in the past, it isn't that anymore. And I just, other than trying to persuade, people who are, of my career standing that, okay, do we have a little bit of extra cash? Could we contribute this? And what would we do with it anyway to make it sustainable? It's like another job. So now, in addition to being critical readers, editors, mentors, teachers, and our own, and scholars, we're going to be fundraisers. I mean, I think a lot of us just sort of can't do anymore.
I can't do it. It's enough, because I do remember that nothing truly approached me how did I invest in money, and
Oh, is this Altschuler?
Altschuler.
Yeah.
How I went to invest in money, and I said I want to invest in the students' membership, and I do not know how to do that, and I passed it on. I don't to Sir Atesh.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Right, and I don't know what I'm saying.
No, but you just gave me an idea. Let me ask you what you think. Is it possible that we could ask senior members to sponsor membership for graduate students? To sponsor one graduate student membership per year? I wonder if that's not a sum of money that is possible, and the framing of it by targeting not just saying, will you give an extra $25, but would you give a gift membership for a graduate student? And then we would have a number of those, and we could just, be, assigning them to graduate students out of a kind of fund.
Be happy to pay for
Amy, I wonder, were the graduate students language or research or?
Whoever wants to join.
No,
Oh.
the graduate students.
No, I mean, but to say, we will pay your OTSA membership. So it would be a way of getting more members. The graduate students wouldn't have to pay, or they would pay less because we could pay their membership fee. They would get used to being members of the organization. And we now have a graduate student member on the board. And we try to make, graduate student membership more active. And then when people are in the habit of it, and they have an income, they themselves would then take over paying their fees. But it's not a lot of money to ask for from people. It's a kind of micro donation, but it targets people who we want to be part of our organization. Because I've heard people say, graduate students, but also younger scholars say, I'm supposed to be a member of 4 different organizations. And when you add it all up, even when it's prorated like it is at Mesa, and even when our membership fees are actually very modest, it's still a significant sum of money every year. So maybe we could think up a plan like that, Baki.
Yep, I think we could definitely think about that. That sounds really good. I mean, I wanted to do a outreach to graduate students to increase our graduate student membership. Now that we actually have a graduate student member at our board, so once we have a feel of how many people we are talking about, then maybe we can create a targeted campaign of for 50 years of OTSA, let's have 50 new graduate student members. Could 50 of our regular members contribute each $25 more so that they could sponsor a graduate student? I think that's a pretty good idea, and we can discuss it right at our second quarterly meeting and then deal with it. I think that's a great idea. Yeah.
Thank you for the inspiration, Dan, because it was you saying graduate students that actually triggered that in my brain.
Yeah. Thank you. I believe this is pretty much it, unless, we do have a question if there was anything challenge, a particular challenge you remember that you would like to share, or anything else you want to add to whatever you shared with us already.
I think that the challenging part of it for me, I hesitate for being shy because and except I did not know about remember the Wisconsin
Kemal Karpat
very well, because I was started to approach him.
Also, you said a challenging part was simply what we've already talked about, being isolated.
Yeah, isolated,
being,
of course.
The only Middle East person at a big university, that was always challenging.
That was
people didn't understand.
Yeah.
The issues.
I think that the challenging part of it for me was figuring out how to figuring how to get Ottoman-ist to Muncie, Indiana.
I went, I came,
Happy memories of you.
I drove from Muncie to Columbus or Columbus to Muncie. I don't remember which direction it was.
You see, now you don't have to bring anybody over. We just
Zoom, yeah.
Right.
It's amazing.
We just show up. Here we are in your dining room.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much for making time for us and sharing your wisdom, your memories. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
It was fun.
It's always fun.